Sit down, please, and accept this cup of tea, for the conversation we are about to have requires calm and, above all, attentive ears. I see the anxiety in your eyes, that rush typical of youth wanting to conquer the world before dawn. But let me tell you, the hardest and most liberating truth I have learned in 80 years of life. Wealth is not a 100-meter sprint. It is a marathon on inclined terrain, and the steepest part, the most brutal and exhausting stretch, is precisely the beginning. I'm not here to sell you illusions of easy money, because that does not build empires. It builds castles of sand. What I'm going to teach you is the sacred mathematics of prosperity. The secret that no one likes to admit is that the first $100,000 are the hardest you will ever earn. They are, forgive my frankness, a true hell of discipline. To gather this initial amount, you do not count on the help of compound interest, you count only on the sweat of your brow, on the deprivation of momentary pleasures, and on the stoic capacity to say no to premature luxury in order to say yes to future freedom. It is a phase of pure accumulation, where you are the sole engine of your wealth, and this is where most give up, because it seems the jar is filling drop by drop. You will need to work harder than others, spend less than you earn, and invest the difference with religious consistency, ignoring the noise of the market and the envy of neighbors who drive finance cars. However, and here lies the magic I want you to understand, the moment you cross the finish line of the first 100,000, the physics of your money changes drastically. It is like pushing a giant boulder up a hill. Until you reach the top, it is pure brute force. But once it starts to descend the other side, gravity takes control. When you have 100,000 invested, a modest return of 7 or 8% a year generates $7,000 or $8,000 without you lifting a finger, which means your money has started working as hard as you do. Suddenly, you have a second silent worker by your side, day and night, generating value. From that point on, the path to $1 million ceases to be a struggle against the current and becomes a matter of time and patience, because interest on interest begins to create an unstoppable snowball. The money that your 100,000 generated also starts generating money, creating a virtuous cycle where wealth feeds on itself. You will realize that the time required to double your capital decreases with each cycle. The second 100,000 comes much faster than the first, and the third faster still. The million is not a distant destination. It is the inevitable consequence of not interrupting this process. Therefore, young one, do not despise small beginnings and do not despair at the slowness of the first years. For you are not just saving money, you are buying your emancipation. Building an army of notes that once gathered will march for you tirelessly until work ceases to be an obligation and becomes a choice. And it is on that day, and not before, that you will be truly rich. Settle deeper into that armchair, young one, and let the fire warm your bones, because the chill outside is fleeting, but the cold of poverty that can last for generations if no one has the courage to light the first bonfire, and today it seems you came here seeking the wood and the fire. You ask me about the million, about the glory of 7 digits, about the absolute freedom that money promises, and I see in your eyes the same feverish shine I had in my 20s. A dangerous mixture of ambition and impatience. But I need you to breathe deep and forget the million for a moment, because talking about the million now is like talking about the summit of Everest to someone who hasn't yet learned to tie their boots. The million is inevitable if you do the basics well, but the basics, my dear, are where most men get lost, seduced by shortcuts that lead to abysses. The naked truth, which most stage gurus won't tell you because it doesn't sell courses, is that wealth is not built with great strokes of luck or genius ideas that change the world overnight, but rather with an almost inhuman capacity to endure boredom and discipline during the most critical phase of your financial life. The journey from zero to the first $100,000. This is the crossing of the desert. Charlie Munger, a man much wiser than I will ever be, once said that accumulating the first $100,000 is a bitch. Forgive the language, but the polite translation does not do justice to the brutality of the experience. And he was entirely right, for during this first phase, you have no friends, you have no tailwind, and worst of all, you don't have math working for you. When you start, you are just your human capital, that is, your ability to sell your hours, your sweat, and your intellect in exchange for currency. And the problem is that human capital is limited. You get tired, you get sick, you need to sleep. While financial capital, money itself, knows no fatigue, takes no vacations, and works 24 hours a day. The secret, therefore, the great alchemy of prosperity, is to convert your human capital into financial capital as quickly as possible, before your back can no longer bear the weight. And this is where our practical lesson begins. To reach the 100,000, you will need to declare war on your own ego, for society is a machine designed to extract money from your pocket and transfer it to the pockets of the shareholders of large companies. They use your desire for acceptance, your insecurity, and your need for status to sell you cars you don't need, clothes that will go out of fashion in 3 months, and experiences that serve only to impress people you don't even like on Instagram. The first step to the 100,000 is to develop an aristocratic indifference regarding the opinion of others. You need to accept looking poor or stingy in the eyes of the ignorant while you build the foundations of your empire, and this requires a strength of character that few possess. Understand the math. If you manage to save and invest $10,000 a year, which is already a Herculean challenge for most, it will take almost a decade to reach the first 100,000 if you depend only on savings. But if you invest this money wisely at a historical average market return rate, say 8 or 10% a year, you shorten this time drastically. However, and here is the trap, in the first few years, compound interest is shy, almost invisible. Imagine you have $10,000 invested and earn 10% a year. That's $1,000 of profit, which seems irrelevant, almost an insult. You look at that yield and think, why so much sacrifice, so much coffee cut, so many outings denied for a meager $1,000? And it is in this valley of despair that people give up, withdraw the money, and buy a new car, killing the tree before it can bear fruit. The lesson of wisdom here is, do not despise small beginnings. You are not investing for the $1,000 of return now. You are investing so that those 10,000 join another 10,000, forming a critical mass. To accelerate this first phase, you have only 2 levers. Increase your active income and decrease your cost of living, creating what we call the gap between what comes in and what goes out. The wider the gap, the faster you cross the desert. This means you must aggressively seek promotions, extra work, develop new skills, not to increase your standard of living, but to buy your freedom. If you get a raise of $500 and increase your spending by $500, you haven't gotten richer. You've just become more dependent. You've increased the size of your cage, but you remain trapped in it. True wealth is measured in time, not things. If you stop working today, how long can you maintain your standard of living? If the answer is 1 month, you are 30 days away from bankruptcy, no matter if you drive a Mercedes. Now, let's talk about where to put this money, because keeping it under the mattress is ensuring that inflation, that silent and cruel tax, devours your effort. You need productive assets, not speculation, not obscure cryptocurrencies, not the hot tip from your brother-in-law. I'm talking about buying pieces of real businesses that generate real profit. The stock market, through diversified index funds, allows you to be a partner in the largest companies in the world without needing to manage employees or inventory. By buying a fund that tracks the S&P 500 or the global market, you are betting on human ingenuity, on the capacity of companies to innovate, sell, and profit. Will there be drops? Yes. The market will bleed, it will panic, and the news will say the world is going to end. Your task as an aspirant to wealth is to do nothing. Inaction is the investor's greatest virtue. When the market falls, you are not losing money. You are seeing a sale of luxury assets. Keep buying. Consistency is the key that opens the door to the 100,000. And then, one day, something magical happens. You look at your account and see that number, $100,000. It might take 5 years. It might take 7. It might take 3 if you are extremely aggressive. But when you cross that line, the physics of money changes. Suddenly, a 10% return is no longer $1,000, it is $10,000. Think about that for a second. $10,000 is an amount that many people take months of hard work to earn, and your money just generated that while you slept, read a book, or walked in the park. It is at this moment that you gain your first tireless employee. Your 100,000 now works as hard as you do. From here, the journey to the million ceases to be a hike on steep terrain and becomes a downhill slide. The second 100,000 comes much faster than the first, because now you have your monthly contributions added to the robust yield of the capital already accumulated. It is the snowball effect. The third 100,000 comes even faster. The time required for each new slice of 100,000 decreases exponentially. I will give you numbers so that the materiality of the thing settles in your mind. If you have 100,000 invested and do not put in another cent, just letting compound interest act at a rate of 10% a year, in 7 years you will have 200,000. In 14 years, 400,000. In 21 years, 800,000. And that's without you doing anything. But you won't stop, will you? You will continue contributing. The path from $100K to $1 million requires a change in mindset, from accumulator to capital allocator. Now you have something to lose. Risk management becomes vital. You need to diversify. You cannot have all your eggs in one basket. You start looking at other asset classes. Real estate, perhaps. Real estate funds that pay monthly rent tax-free in some places. Debt securities for stability. The wisdom here is to understand that greed is the enemy of prosperity. Many reach 100 or 200,000 and think they are market geniuses. Start making risky bets, use leverage, try to time the market. Do not do this. The cemetery of finance is full of people who tried to get rich too fast and ended up back at square one. The secret to getting rich is not to be in a hurry. The secret to staying rich is to be afraid. Afraid of losing what you built. Afraid of arrogance. Maintain humility. When you finally reach the million, and you will if you stay the course, you will realize the greatest irony of all. Your life will not change as much as you imagined. You will not start eating gold or levitating. You will still have human problems, sorrows, and joys. But there will be a fundamental difference, a quietness in the soul that only financial security provides. The million does not serve to buy Ferraris, my young friend. The million serves to buy the capacity to say no. No to an abusive boss. No to a project that hurts your values. No to the anxiety of not knowing how to pay the bills if you get sick. Money, in its noblest essence, is crystallized freedom. But let me step back, because I see you are doing mental math. You must be thinking, but what about life? Will I spend 10 years suffering to enjoy later? No. And that is the final lesson on prosperity. The journey needs to be sustainable. If you live a miserable life to save money, you will give up halfway or reach the end, bitter and sick. Find the balance. Frugality is not about deprivation, it is about efficiency. It is about spending extravagantly on the things you love and cutting ruthlessly on the things you don't like. If you love to travel, travel, but perhaps cut the new car or the designer clothes that bring you no real joy. Money is a tool to maximize happiness, not a video game scoreboard. The process of turning 100,000 into a million will also teach you about patience and long-term vision, virtues that overflow into all areas of life. You will become a better parent, a better partner, a better professional, because you learn to plant seeds and wait for the right season for the harvest. You will understand cycles. There will be years when your net worth will drop 20% or 30%. In 2008, I saw half of my fortune evaporate on paper in a matter of weeks. Do you know what I did? Nothing. Or rather, I bought more. Because I knew the world wasn't going to end, that people would continue buying toothpaste, food, energy, and technology. And those who sold in panic realized the loss, while I, who waited, saw my net worth triple in the following decade. That is temperament. Warren Buffett says investing is simple, but not easy. It is simple because the math is basic. It is not easy because we are emotional creatures, biologically programmed to flee from pain, loss, and run towards pleasure, quick gain. You need to fight against your biology. Another crucial point on this trajectory towards the million is shielding against lifestyle inflation. As your income increases and your investments grow, the temptation to level up is overwhelming. You convince yourself that you deserve a bigger house, a more expensive club. Be careful. Every fixed cost you add to your life is an anchor that delays your journey. The truly rich often live well below their means. I know multimillionaires who drive 5-year-old cars and have lived in the same house for 2 decades. They don't need to prove anything to anyone. Their wealth is silent. Noise, ostentation is usually a sign of debt or new, insecure money. Be the silent rich. Let your bank statements be the only witness to your success. And remember the golden rule of asset protection, geographic diversification. Do not have all your money in the currency of a single country, in the economy of a single nation. The world is unstable. Governments change rules. Currencies lose value. Having part of your net worth invested in strong economies, in strong currencies, is the ultimate insurance against local catastrophes. When you have 100,000, this is desirable. When you have 1,000,000, it is mandatory. Finally, understand that the first million is just a milestone, a buoy in the middle of the ocean. It is not the end of the line. The final goal is not a number. It is autonomy. A day will come when the yield from your investments covers all your monthly expenses. We call this financial independence. On that day, you retire not from work, but from the need to work. You can continue working if you want, but you will do it for passion, for purpose, not for survival. And work done for passion is always more profitable and rewarding. Therefore, stand up, finish your tea, and go home to look at your bills. Start hunting down waste. Start studying index funds. Start working on that extra project. The first $100,000 are waiting for you behind a mountain of sacrifices, but I promise you, with the certainty of someone who has seen the sun rise on the other side, the view from up there is worth every drop of sweat. Go build your freedom. Time is passing, and compound interest only rewards those who start early. I see that you haven't risen, that the cup of tea remains untouched, and that your questions, though unvoiced, hang heavy in the air between us like the smoke from this cigar. And that is good, because it means you have realized that what I have told you so far is only the tip of the iceberg, the brute mechanics of the thing, but the true engineering of wealth happens in the invisible trenches of the mind and human behavior. You want to know what happens in the middle of the path, in that vast and nebulous purgatory that exists between the first 100,000 and the glorious million, because it is easy to romanticize the heroic beginning and the victorious ending. But life, my young friend, life happens in the middle, and it is in this middle that the demons live. The intermediate phase, the one where you are no longer poor, but not yet rich enough to be free, is the most dangerous terrain you will tread. A swamp where complacency and boredom drown more dreams than a lack of money ever did. When you reach $300,000, $400,000, you enter what I call the danger zone of comfort. You look around and see that you already have more than most people you know. Your car is nice, your clothes are nice, you eat in decent restaurants without looking at the right side of the menu, and a voice whispers in your ear saying that it is enough, that you can take your foot off the gas, that you deserve a bigger reward. This is where the multimillionaire dies and the indebted upper-middle-class citizen is born. The discipline that brought you to the 100,000 was driven by the fear of scarcity, a powerful and primitive motivation. But the discipline that will take you to the million needs to be driven by something much more subtle and difficult to maintain: purpose. You need to understand that in this intermediate phase, boredom will be your constant companion, and if you seek excitement in your investments, you will lose money. Well-done investing is, by nature, as exciting as watching paint dry or grass grow, and if you feel adrenaline when clicking the buy button, you are not investing, you are gambling, and the casino, whether in Las Vegas or on Wall Street, always wins in the end. Wisdom lies in finding excitement outside your bank account, in building businesses, in art, in relationships, but keeping money in a sacred monotony. And speaking of relationships, come closer, because I am going to tell you something worth more than any stock tip you will ever hear in your life. The choice of who you will share your life with is the most important financial decision you will ever make, far surpassing asset allocation or career choice. You can be the most disciplined investor in the world. You can have the mind of Warren Buffett and the frugality of a monk. But if you marry someone whose financial values are opposite to yours, someone who sees money as a means of immediate status and not as a tool for freedom, you are condemned to row a boat with a hole in the hull. Generational wealth is not built by lone wolves. It is built by couples who operate like a company, with aligned vision, where one covers the other's back in moments of crisis. I have seen empires undone in divorce courts and fortunes evaporate, because one partner needed to fill an emotional void with unbridled consumption. Find someone who understands that real luxury is having time, not designer handbags. Someone willing to live a few years like no one else lives, so that later you can live the rest of your life like no one else can. Because the journey to the million is long, and there will be storms. And speaking of storms, do not think for a second that the graph of your wealth will be a straight ascending line, for the market is a manic, depressive beast, and there will be days, weeks, perhaps years, when you will see your life's work shrink before your eyes, and it is in these hours that character is forged. I vividly remember a period when the market fell 40%. Panic was palpable in the streets. Headlines screamed the end of capitalism, and my friends, intelligent and cultured men, sold everything they had at rock bottom to save what was left. But I tell you that wealth is transferred in these crises from the impatient to the patient. You need to develop a stomach of steel. You need to learn to look at chaos and see opportunity, to understand that when the world is on sale, it is time to be greedy. But this courage is not born overnight. It comes from the study of history, from knowing that humanity has survived world wars, pandemics, banking collapses, and energy crises, and that every time, without exception, we recovered, innovated, and grew. Betting against the global economy in the long run is betting against the human capacity to solve problems, and that is a bet I will never make. But let us delve a little deeper into the mathematics of the thing, specifically into what separates the rich from the truly prosperous, the diversification of income streams. Up to 100,000, your focus was saving your salary, but to reach the million and beyond, you need to start thinking like an owner, not just a consumer of financial assets. The stock market is fantastic. It is the engine of passive wealth. But explosive wealth often comes from equity, from having a stake in businesses, whether yours or others. As your capital grows, you should start looking for opportunities to invest in the real economy, perhaps financing a trusted partner's business, perhaps buying a neglected property in an up-and-coming neighborhood to renovate, perhaps creating a digital product that sells while you sleep. The idea is to create multiple tributaries flowing into the same river, so that if one source dries up, if the stock market crashes or you lose your job, the others continue to flow, ensuring that your compounding process is never interrupted. Interruption is the cardinal sin of compound interest. Every time you need to withdraw your principal to cover an emergency, you are not just losing that money, you are killing all the future that money would generate. Therefore, before thinking about being aggressive, be paranoid with your safety reserve. The money that gives you peace to sleep is more valuable than the money that gives you high returns but takes away your sleep. And there is a subtle trap, my young friend, that catches the intelligent and the astute, which is the trap of complexity. As you study more, learn about options, derivatives, arbitrage, exotic cryptocurrencies, you start to think that the basics, the simple index fund, is too little for your brilliant intellect. You start wanting to tinker with the machine, wanting to optimize the unoptimizable, and that is where arrogance precedes the fall. The greatest investors I knew were not math geniuses who solved differential equations in their heads. They were practical philosophers who understood human nature and did the simple things with savage consistency for decades. Complexity is often just a way for the financial sector to charge you higher fees. They create products you don't understand to solve problems you don't have. Keep your investments so simple that you can explain them to a 10-year-old child with a piece of chalk and a sidewalk. If you need a spreadsheet with complex macros to understand where your money is, you don't own your money, you are held hostage by it. Now look at me, look at these wrinkled hands, and understand that time is the only asset you cannot buy, no matter how many millions you accumulate. There is a silent tragedy I see happen repeatedly. Men who spend their entire lives postponing happiness for when they have $1 million, and when they finally get there, they have forgotten how to live, or worse, have lost the health necessary to enjoy freedom. Prosperity is not just about the final balance, it is about the quality of the journey. Do not sacrifice your health on the altar of wealth, because a healthy man has 1,000 wishes, but a sick man has only one. Invest in your body and your mind with the same diligence you invest in the stock market. Eat real food, lift weights, sleep 8 hours, read the classics, cultivate friendships that do not depend on interest. Money potentiates who you already are. If you are an anxious and unhappy person without money, you will be an anxious and unhappy person with $1 million in the account, only with more comfort to suffer. Financial wealth must be the foundation for a life rich in experiences, in generosity, in impact. And this brings us to the concept of enough. Define, before you get there, what is enough for you, because capitalism is designed to move the finish line every time you approach it. If you do not have a number, or rather a lifestyle defined as your goal, you will fall into the luxury rat race, competing with people who have billions. And in that comparison, you will always be poor. I know men with $50 million who feel like failures because their neighbor has a 100-foot yacht and they only have an 80-foot one. That is not prosperity, that is a mental illness. True financial freedom is the ability to wake up in the morning and say, I have enough to do whatever I want today. And often, enough is much less than you imagine if you are not trying to impress the world. When you reach $500,000, you will realize that security already exists, that the fear of ruin has disappeared, and at this point, you must begin the transition from accumulating to distributing and living. Do not wait until you are 80 to help others. Generosity is a habit, not an event, and paradoxically, opening your hand to give seems to signal to the brain that there is abundance, creating a virtuous cycle of mental prosperity that attracts more opportunities. I will tell you a secret that took me decades to decipher. Money has a spiritual energy. It flees from those who chase it with desperation and runs to those who treat it with respect, but without reverence. Treat your investments like employees, not masters. Do not check the balance every day. That is like digging up the seed to see if it has taken root. Give time to time. The first million is hard because it requires you to change who you are. You need to kill the impulsive consumer inside you to give birth to the capital manager. This death hurts. You will have to say no to trips with friends. You will have to use the old phone for 2 more years. You will have to cook at home when you are tired, and no one will applaud you for it. There will be no likes on Instagram for your bank transfer to the brokerage. It is a lonely and silent victory. But one day, you will be walking down the street, perhaps on a sunny Tuesday, while everyone is locked in offices under fluorescent lights, and you will realize that you own your time, that no one can give you orders, that you are the captain of your soul. In that moment, you will understand that every no you said in the past was a brick in the construction of this castle of freedom. And when that day comes, and you have your million, do not stop working, but change the reason why you work. Work gives dignity, gives social purpose, keeps us sharp. Idle retirement is the waiting room for death. Use your financial freedom to take risks you couldn't take before, to work on projects that pay little but feed the soul, to mentor the younger ones, to create art. Money buys the option not to do what you hate so you can do more of what you love. Keep learning, because the world changes fast and inflation is the termite of stagnant money. You need to remain a student of markets, trends, technology. Do not become a grumpy old man who complains that, "In my time it was better." Adapt. Artificial intelligence, new energies, biotechnology, all this will create new waves of wealth, and you, with your accumulated capital, will be positioned to surf these waves, not to be drowned by them. Finally, think about legacy. Not the money you will leave, but the principles. If you leave only money to your children without teaching them how it was earned and how it must be kept, you will not be leaving a blessing, you will be leaving a curse that will destroy them. Teach by example. Let them see you saving, investing, donating, treating people with respect regardless of social class. The true lesson of prosperity that this old man can give you is not in the numbers, but in the intention. Money is just an amplifier. If you are a good person, money will make you a great person, capable of touching thousands of lives. If you are a bad person, money will make you a tyrant. Therefore, while you climb this steep mountain toward your first million, work as hard on your character as you work on your portfolio, for reaching the top and discovering that you are alone and that you do not like the person you have become is the final definition of failure. Now go. The night advances and the market opens in a few hours. You have work to do and I have a rest to take. The seed is planted. It is up to you to water it with sweat, patience, and time.